and 104.3 HD3.
Record power demand on Jack Callahan, Fox News. In California Tuesday, the sixth day of a massive heat wave. The agency that oversees the state's power grid had warned residents late Tuesday afternoon to reduce their power usage or there would be rolling blackouts. That alert has now been lifted without forced outages. Governor Gavin Newsom thankful.
Californians, you've rallied before, and we can do it again. Keep it up.
The extreme heat isn't forecast to break until Thursday night. No indication yet from the Justice Department whether the federal government will appeal the appointment of an independent third party to oversee the evidence seized in the raid on former President Trump's home.
Many have applauded the appointment of a special master to review the documents seized from Mar-a-Lago, calling it a common-sense way to help assure the public that the DOJ investigation is fair and transparent. But legal experts also say the decision is somewhat baffling because it tends to muddy the water. They believe a special master should only be used to protect attorney-client privilege and not to weed out documents covered under executive privilege. The DOJ can certainly appeal the ruling, which would then come before the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and of the 11 judges on that court, 6 were appointed by former President Trump.
Fox's Trace Gallagher. Steve Bannon, a one-time advisor to the former president, bracing for an indictment in New York State, saying in a statement it is the partisan political weaponization of the criminal justice system. The Washington Post, quoting sources, is saying the indictment expected Thursday will allege fraud in fundraising for a group called We Build the Wall. In Massachusetts, Trump-backed former state lawmaker Jeff Deal has won the GOP primary to run for governor. Democrats picking Attorney General Maura Healey as their candidate. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has told CBS News she will not run for president ever again. America is listening to Fox News.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Happy day. This is Clara Manglona from Security Title. A power of attorney can be a useful tool in a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate a secure closing. We are here to help.
First-degree murder charges have been filed against the man accused of abducting a Memphis school teacher.
A devastating outcome for the family and friends of 34-year-old Eliza Fletcher, a wife, mother of 2, and granddaughter of a prominent businessman. Found dead Monday behind an abandoned home in Memphis. Investigators say surveillance video captured a man running aggressively toward Fletcher before she was forced into a black GMC Terrain while she was out on an early morning run near the University of Memphis last Friday. 38-year-old Cleotha Abston Henderson, a career felon, was arrested Saturday by U.S. Marshals after investigators were able to match his DNA to a pair of sandals found near the scene. He made his first court appearance Tuesday on multiple charges, including kidnapping and tampering with evidence.
Fox's Laura Ingle. In Canada, the search for a second suspect in weekend stabbing deaths of 10 people continues. The UN Atomic Watchdog Agency is urging Russia and Ukraine to establish a nuclear safety and security protection zone around the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, fearing the fighting could trigger a catastrophe in the country that's still haunted by the Chernobyl disaster. The UN group is calling for an immediate end to shelling in the area. A prominent electronic cigarette maker has settled an investigation by several states into its marketing practices.
Juul Labs has agreed to pay nearly $440 million to settle a probe by 33 states that found it used launch parties, product giveaways, and social media campaigns to market e-cigarettes to teenagers. The FDA blames Juul's high-nicotine vaping products for what it calls an epidemic of underage vaping among teens. The company in a statement saying the deal is a significant step toward resolving past issues and that it remains committed to combating underage use. The settlement isn't the end of Juul's legal troubles. The company still faces 9 lawsuits from other states and hundreds of individual claims.
Fox's Steve Rappaport. And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Are you looking for a new place to hang out with your friends? Let's go along the sidelines at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Located at 154 Iriarte Road, Unit 4 and 5 in Tamuning behind Royal Bigs. Sidelines, a hidden gem with nothing but great things to offer. Great atmosphere, great food, top shelf drinks, and a great team. What are we waiting for? Let the fun begin at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. See you there.
Choice Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning show.
Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all 3.
671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
Tell me about it, stud.
Circle K's Craft Beer and Whiskey Festival is back on Saturday, October 22nd. We rockin' and rollin' at the Dusatani Guam Resort from 2 to 10 p.m. Bring your friends and come dressed in your best grease costume to win up to $500 in cash and prizes. So bust out those leather jackets and 50-style outfits as we party the night away at Circle K's Craft Beer and Whiskey Fest. Don't be a square. Get your tickets now at craftbeerfestguam.com or cruise on by any 76 Circle K location. Now that's cool, baby.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I'm all dressed up today, Jose. I got to go downtown after the show, so I figured I might as well wear my Class A's tonight.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sharp.
Got to look sharp. Yeah, it's really difficult to look sharper than the way you look in your Tailgater T-shirt. So we're going to sell Tailgater T-shirts today too, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. We have any new additions to the Rogues Gallery?
Not yet, but they can send as soon as they get their shirt, put it on, take a selfie, and send it to the Point's WhatsApp at 671-797-8255.
And you too can be a Tailgater star. Okay, so let's go to Jemmy Ikotny. The Daily News has done it again. Managed to fill up a whole column on the editorial page with basically nothing. At the bottom, there's information about how you can make a charitable donation to UOG. And the UOG is there and it's doing a great job. And it's just a wonderful editorial. If you've never, ever read another editorial before. Okay, so we go from there and to another sort of an editorialized comment that runs in the Daily News. You remember the Daily News fired all of its regular columnists, guys like Lee Weber and so on, and now they're going for diversity and inclusion. So today it's a guy named Ken Cooper. And Ken Cooper, I suppose we'll see him once a month, but he said, "I am a proud Gofigan, a family with deep roots in the beautiful village of Homatak." A proud Gofigan. And then he tells you a little bit about the derivation of his name. And I always thought Gofigan was, Egan means hot, spicy, right? And Gof is an intensifier. Gof Malati, very smart, right? Gof Mutung really smelly. So I thought Gof Igen probably was very, very hot, very spicy, very pica. But he says it could also mean hegam. It could have come from a word hegam. And he tells us that hegam was a tool like an adze. For you probably know that from your boat building, huh, Jose? Yeah. So, and then he's a pretty good writer. He takes that and turns it and heads for society and how, it's important to have some idea where society's going, do what you can to influence it. But then, of course, he puts that aside and goes straight to the narrative. And here's how he does it. For those who call this island home, this is the work ahead of us. How do we make our people I Tautau Guahan? So no sumaga zo gwini nagi isla Guan lo tutongo zangin guaho I Tautau Guan. Senior na guaho Tautau America. Tautau San Lago. Lo Maseafa. So I think that's who he's speaking to. He's speaking to Tautau Guam. He's not speaking to me and the likes of me. How do we make our people realize they have a hand in their future? Our kids do not deserve despair. We need to sing a different song, a hymn for the hopeful. The chorus is that we all hold the hegam. I am reminded of my good friend Joseph Certeza. When we were students together at UOG, Joey used to have a pin on his backpack that had the words, "One person can only do so much." Yet the word, quote, "only" was scratched out so that it read, "One person can do so much." Little does he know that this tiny pen changed how I thought about myself. It made me realize that the challenges of the world are giants, but that I wield a sling. David and Goliath. Yeah. Interesting imagery. Hopefully it has the same effect on you. Then he goes right into it. The beauty of this is acknowledging that the future is not set. The future is not clear and ultimately is not decided. If we defaulted to looking at the future as an exacerbation of the present, for example, Guam would continue to be a militarized, unincorporated territory. So, Gof Igen, would you be happier if Guam were a militarized, incorporated territory? Because with guys like Keneal Weird operating, you may get your wish. Because if Downs is overruled, Downs versus Bidwell is overruled, that's exactly where you're going to be, in an incorporated territory. Going back and starting the sentence over again. If we defaulted to looking at the future as an exacerbation of the present, for example, Guam would continue to be a militarized, unincorporated territory. That is not a future I want to live in. Yet, this uncertainty of the future, while being scary, can be comforting. This takes a slight change of perspective. The uncertainty of the future means there is room for alternatives. It means that we all have a hand in deciding our collective fate. Now, when he says we all, does he mean everybody or just that selected group that he referred to, that Tautau Guam group?
Our people.
Yeah. What we do today directly affects the kind of future we can have tomorrow. There are many roads to follow in choosing of the futures ahead. What you do right now is a step down one of these roads. Kenneth Cooper. And there's a picture of him wearing what could possibly be a tailgater shirt. It looks like a black T-shirt. It doesn't show enough of the shirt to see if it's got the logo on it, but he's wearing a Sanahi, so you know he's really serious.
Let me offer a slightly different perspective on who's holding the higum, per my short experience with canoe carving and the culture. We all know that the higum you can build on your own, but it's a design that has variances, but it's still a higum.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that a canoe you can build on your own and carve and have little details that make it your own, but the style and the design is pretty much similar and is set. And yeah, we all have a higum and adze to carve with. But we also understand that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. And so when we're carving, we want to make sure that we still remain something that's recognizable, but not so far off that we can't exist in our own lane. So if you can build your own canoe, but if it doesn't float, it doesn't matter. And I think we have to understand that while he might not like a militarized, unincorporated territory,
mm-hmm.
the future doesn't really look to forwarding if we are just by ourselves and we're not attached to the United States or somebody who's going to protect us. So we have to understand what we're carving. And that's that's my perspective on this.
Good perspective, Jose. Very good. Thank you. Okay, let's take a check on the card and see what we've got on the card today. Of course, I've got... do I have today's card? What is today, September 7?
Mm-hmm. Similar to yesterday with CSE Mini Hatch. You want?
Yeah, let me take a look, Jose. Oh, no, I've got it. I'm just looking at the wrong part here. I'm okay, thanks. Yeah, this is what I've got. I've got Felix versus Lou, and I'm going to give you an eyewitness report from what went on down at the Hilton today. I've got Duenas versus the Carl. I've got the Carl versus Sam Shinohara. Judge Gatewood versus the Pope. CSC versus Whitewash. Marijuana versus the People. And the Democrat Party versus democracy, something they know almost nothing about. But the Democrats are very quick to tell you that when things don't go their way, that is a threat to our democracy. When Hillary Clinton didn't get elected president in 2016, it's definitely a threat to our democracy. All right, so I'm going to just breeze running by Paul Zerzan and systemic racism. I think we're all pretty well caught up on that. And go from there to Felix versus Lou. Now, the latest on this, before I get into my report, the latest on this is that the Post ran an article about, how Mike and Sabrina have been cozying up to the Camacho Ada campaign. And if you drive around and look at signs, you'll see that there are stickers. There are Mike and Sabrina stickers on the Camacho Ada signs and vice versa. And there have been video opportunities where they're together. Sabrina, of course, attended the Lincoln Day dinner last week. And people have been chattering. Actually, people were chattering even before the election, myself included, that the enmity between the Leon Guerrero camp and the San Nicolas camp almost guaranteed that whoever lost the election would not support the winner. That whoever lost, whoever lost and that person's supporters would either cross over and vote for Felix or just stay home. And the ink was hardly dry on the count of the election when that started to happen. And, of course, the news has been full of the fact that Felix has reached out. One of my favorite expressions, reaching out. And Felix has reached out to Mike and Bree, and they've responded very favorably to that. Lilian Guerrero has not reached out to anybody except, I don't know, maybe Matt Topaznia? Anyhow, she hasn't reached out to anybody so far. And Rory, of course, said, well, you know, the custom is that right after the votes are counted, the one that doesn't prevail calls up and congratulates the winner and pledges support. And when that didn't happen, what did that make you think, Rory? Then Rory goes on to say, we're respecting their wishes. They wanted some time to think and pray, so we're respecting their wishes. So this article in the Post picks up here. When Sean Gumatauto, who is one of the muckety-mucks in the Camacho Ada campaign, was asked about developments, he said, if these developments amount to an actual endorsement by either or both Democrats, Gumatauto informed the Post of an upcoming event between the San Nicolas Salas Montanani ticket and their supporters scheduled for Thursday evening when a formal announcement could be made. So they don't tell us where. I think we're all looking forward to the delegates meeting Thursday night with his supporters. We're waiting for that to get anything official. The campaign's Facebook page posted a statement Sunday afternoon along with a flyer inviting supporters to the bar-hosted event later this week. So apparently they're going to have an event at one of the bars. Not only Mike and Bree will be there, but their supporters are going to be there. So Rory, it kind of looks like the horse has left the barn here. Now, we do have some news from Rory at the bottom of the page. Rory Respicio, the campaign manager for Lilian Guerrero Josh Tenorio team, confirmed that as of Tuesday afternoon, their primary opponents have yet to concede their 62.3% to 37.5% election loss. Well, a previous statement given last week on the lack of communication didn't begrudge their rivals' request for time to pray and reflect on the election outcome. Respicio struck a more pointed tone when reached for comment days after the primary, saying that their party challengers are clearly courting their general election opposition. The well-being of the people of Guam remains at the forefront of the all-in campaign, taking the high road whenever our opponents and their social media trolls can choose to go low while hiding their true identity. Is he mixed up? Is he talking about the farts there?
I think so.
Yeah. Respicio told the Post the governor's campaign has been reaching out to residents to bolster their support heading into the November campaign. At 40%, this year's primary election amounted to the lowest voter turnout since 1972. The choice in this election is between moving forward with Lou and Josh to a safe, fair, compassionate, prosperous future, or going back to the failed policies under our opponent when he had 8 years at Adelup, Respicio said. Camacho likewise laid out the contrast he sees between Guam's voters' two choices for governor, striking a religious point when speaking at the Lincoln dinner. As a man of faith, I will tell you that it's biblical that good times prevail under good leadership and bad times prevail under bad leadership. So once again, the Daily News to the rescue. The story here, the real story is this. The San Nicolas Montanani are more than likely going to endorse Camacho Ada. And it's going to happen on Thursday night. That's the real story. The second part of the story is that Rory is finally starting to wake up. But then we've got to throw in some campaign rhetoric here from Lou. The choice this election is between moving, that's not part of this story. That's just a good gratuitous addition to help Lou and Josh get their message out. What newspaper was this in? The Post. Yeah. The Leon Guerrero Post. Okay, now, let's take a short break and I'll go straight from here to the Hilton.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
Does your physical workplace have an impact on the mental outlook of workers, their overall job satisfaction, and their productivity? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll talk about that and what you might want to do about it. It's The Extra Point here on 93.3.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point by Jerry Roberts at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts on The Ray Gibson Show on 93.3 The Point.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
And now back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So today at the Chamber of Commerce, we had Josh, we had Lou versus Felix Camacho, and I'll give you my impressions. First of all, the room was packed. I had reservations. I had a feeling that had I just showed up at the door, I would not have been able to get in. I didn't do a head count, but it looked to me like an awful lot of Republicans, very, very few Democrats.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So obviously Felix was there. Felix's wife was there. Lou was there. Lou's husband was there. I didn't see Josh was there, but I didn't see Matt Topaznia. Maybe
he hitched a ride with Lou.
Maybe, could be. It wasn't that night anyhow, so it's probably okay. Yeah. So I'm going to give you my general impression of delivery before I go into content. Felix's delivery was calm, cool, and collected. Lou was strident. An edge on her voice, speaking louder than she really needed to, given the fact that there was a sound system there. A tenor of her voice that was more argumentative than convincing. And that pretty much prevailed throughout the entire debate, right up until closing statements. Felix had the real advantage there. He closed last. Lou's, going to content for a moment, Lou basically ran against Felix, the governor who left office in 2012. So she didn't so much as run on her record. She ran on her record only to rebut, as opposed to saying, Felix was the governor for 8 years back at the beginning of this century. You all remember what it was like. I'm not going to go back and dwell on that. I'm going to tell you all of the accomplishments that occurred in the Leon Guerrero Tenorio. And she didn't do that. She went back as though she were running against Felix in 2008 and tried to make points about his administration. I don't think that's a very successful technique because, the classic approach in politics to that was, well, yeah, that was then, but this is now. So that seemed to be her basic pitch. The Felix had a positive message as to what the island would be like in a Camacho administration. And he also took some shots at Lou as far as some of the things that happened during his administration. But the real fireworks and the whole debate occurred at the end. Each candidate was allowed to give a closing statement. Lou pretty much went the same place that she had gone before. Felix took off the gloves and came right back at her using words like dictator, doing just what you wanted to do. It wasn't about health, it was about politics.
And he didn't even have red lights behind him.
No. Yeah, so he really laid it out. And he, the roadblock and the whole thing. So, once again, trying to put myself in the place of a disinterested stranger who would not go for Republican or Democrat just on partisan basis, I'd have to give the debate to Felix. If you're sitting there saying, if I were able to vote in November, which one of these two would I vote for? I think that the decision would have gone to Felix, that Felix won that debate. Especially the way he was able to hang on and be calm, cool, and collected right up until the end. And then at the end, he pulled out both of his 6 guns and fired away. It was a nice climax to the way he'd handled himself during the debate. So that's pretty much my analysis of how the debate went. If anyone else would like to chime in, Jose, you watched it.
I was watching segments of it at a time because I wasn't able to watch it live, but the same thing that you said. There was good points on both sides. Clearly, one candidate was more rattled than the other, and then the fireworks at the end left me like with my jaw dropped. I was like, "Wow, where was this early on?"
Mm-hmm.
It was being reserved.
Yeah. You don't step out in the first minute of the first round and try to use a right cross and try to knock your opponent out. That's not the way you do it. You got to spar for a few rounds, some left jabs and left hooks and things like that before you come up with a knockout punch. And that's exactly what it was. Okay, next we've got Duenas versus the Carl. And this is an article ran in the Post. Lawmakers raise concerns with the budget. And, of course, 6 Republicans voted against the budget. No, not 6. The senator from Argentina voted in favor of the budget. Therese Tetlahi crossed party lines and voted with the Republicans. Beginning to think in terms of Therese as a kind of constructive Republican.
Fiscally.
Yeah. But the real meat of this article, where in the hell is it? Oh, yeah, here it is. Chris Duenas said he voted no for 2 main reasons. The first related to pay raise authorized outside of the legislative process. We spent a lot of time talking about that on the show. How Frank Blas kind of blundered into it. And you can see that Chris kept his powder dry here and waited to sight in his rifle and take the shot at the appropriate time without losing the support of the teachers in the process. He said, and as an example of the fiscal 2023 budget bill includes increased appropriations to the Department of Ed to accommodate pay adjustments recommended by the Department of Administration and approved by the governor. These adjustments became effective in May and were initially paid by reallocating some of DOE's American Rescue Plan funding although the authority for that source would last only to September 30, or the end of the fiscal year. To support raises beyond September 30, lawmakers adopted an educator pay plan in addition to increasing DOE's appropriation. But despite incorporation into the budget bill, a sticking point for some lawmakers had been how teacher pay raises were implemented outside of the process outlined in the fiscal 2022 budget law, which would not have effectuated raises until June 30, 2023. Early this year, the governor also authorized pay raises for law enforcement, etc. When these type of things are done in a manner within the executive branch or other controlling bodies to where it's not in concert with the legislature, it basically obligates the people to those obligations without consideration of the entire budget, Duane said, and that concerns me. One, it can either be an empty promise in the fiscal years ahead should there not be such robust and good times. The second thing is normally pay adjustments are done through a full vetted study, so there's parity and there's an understanding on how sustainability is with it going forward. So I characterized this whole thing here a couple of weeks ago as pay raise chicken. The governor came along and she used some of her federal money, which she has the unfettered ability to spend, according to the famous old case of Wong versus Kamina. The legislature has no role in it at all. So she gave the teachers raises until September 30, because that was the end of that money. So what happens on October 1? Pay raise chicken. Let the legislature not appropriate money to continue those raises in effect, and we'll see what happens in November, the governor says, as she invites the boys into the pay raise rat trap.
First to flinch loses.
Yeah. So Frank Blas came out and related what I said, but in such a manner as on listening to him thought that the thing to do would be to let the pay raises die on September 30. Well, that's not what he said. But, you know, when you're talking about people's pay raises, they're looking for someone to come out and say, I'll make sure you get to keep that pay raise. You guys work hard. You're wonderful. So it was a game of pay raise chicken, further complicated because there's a real problem with statutory construction, which no one at the legislature seemed to want to spend any time on at all to figure out exactly what the law was at that time. And then there was the law that was enacted in last year's budget that talked in terms of a pay raise plan being forwarded to the legislature, which, of course, never happened. So after we got into the game of pay raise chicken, then the education folks said, oh, here's that plan that maybe you were thinking about. And as Chris Duane said, it found its way into the budget, and the appropriation was increased. But Chris Duane said, I ain't voting for it. Smart move by Chris Duane. If everything works out, if the teachers get their money, no one will remember that Chris Duane voted for it. If down the road, all of a sudden, we don't have enough money to pay the raises and they've got to be rescinded, Chris Duane gets on his petition for a writ of I told you so. Remember this, guys? Yeah. So that's one reason he didn't vote for it. The second issue Duane cited was the addition of an amendment that grants the Guam Visitors Bureau general manager full authority and responsibility over the agency's business affairs, to which Duane said he is adamantly opposed. I think that the general manager's position, now who's the general manager again? The Carl. I think the general manager's position at this point, there being issues with regard to loopholes and the like, should be changed and handled by a standalone bill being introduced at the legislature. heard in public hearings and voted on the floor, not asserted into the budget. I think the miscellaneous provisions in the budget bill, which I have now dubbed the mischievous provisions, is not to change the structure of a public corporation. But the interesting thing here is that in that budget bill, in the miscellaneous provisions, you can skip through the public hearing procedure, all the red tape, and if you got 8 folks who will vote for it, even though the other 7 take off their shoes and they're pounding their desks with their shoes, hollering and screaming, and it goes to the legislature, it goes to the governor, she signs it, it is the law. So it's a way to slide things into the law that might not make it down the ordinary path. People who have been around the legislature for a long time know that. Can you think of anyone who's been around the legislature longer who would have a better idea of how to get things through the legislature than the Carl, former chairman of the Finance Committee, former Speaker of the legislature, probably as an astute a politician that we'll ever see. Right up, he and Mark Forbes, right up there in the champion class of understanding how politics works, what can be done, what can't be done, how to go about doing it. So I've had a packet of documents here called Carl versus Sam Shinohara, because much of the infighting here is between Carl, the general manager of the Visitors Bureau, and Sam Shinohara, who is elected by United Airlines as their rep on the Bureau. So I've gotten a lot of other things, and I hope I can cover all the bases here, but Carl wrote a letter to the legislature on August 29. And he said this: as the GVB Board of Directors suspended its public meetings until bylaws can be fixed, please accept this as the official position on fiscal 2023 budgets bill by its chief administrative officer. The legislature provided in GVB's Enabling Act that the general manager, as the CAO, shall be primarily responsible for the agency, so the temporary authority granted to the GM in the fiscal year 23 bill is necessary until the membership has full opportunity to remedy issues with its board and its bylaws. During the time of the board's self-imposed suspension, it's important that this remedial effort continue without interruption. I therefore ask that you leave unchanged the language included for GVB's fiscal 2023 budget. This letter addresses the following. 1. Director Shinohara's letter usurping board authority in its decision to suspend operations. 2. Corrective action planning to ensure lawful bylaws and board action going forward. 3. Potentially unlawful board-approved allocations and expenditures. 4. Inclusion of the membership and promulgation of bylaws and director suggestions. So this is in that budget bill. First, please recognize that the board approved the fiscal 23 budget as January 13 meeting. As you can see in the 13 board meeting minutes attached, Shinohara took an active part. He had the opportunity to provide input on the budget and even moved to have it passed. Because he has not provided a complete disclosure of his financial interests prior to voting on expense allocations, his motive for wanting to take an active part in the allocation should be questioned. Pretty interesting. So Carl is moving forward saying, somebody's got to do something. And the old saying, nature abhors a vacuum. Not as much as Carl Gutierrez abhors a vacuum. So he says there's a vacuum. The board has said, the board's gone on strike. We've suspended meetings. But the show must go on. Got to have a budget. This is the budget that they wanted in 2023 because they have suspended operations and because of some of the kerfuffle going on at the GVB. I'm going to ask you to give me kind of emergency authority to take the Visitors Bureau forward during the next year. And then he takes a shot at Shinohara saying he hasn't done a financial disclosure. Well, we know that the financial disclosure law requires everybody who's appointed by the governor, confirmed by the legislature, or elected by the people must file an elaborate financial disclosure form. Shinohara is not appointed by the governor. He is a industry rep. So there's an old Attorney General's opinion that says the industry reps don't have to do that. Now, I've talked about this before, and perhaps this model is flawed. I talked yesterday about men of affairs and impartiality. So when it comes to the tourist industry, impartiality is good. You don't want somebody who's using his position on that board to grab the government's back scratcher and really have at his own back with that back scratcher. You don't want a situation where a board member finds out where GVB keeps the feathers, goes in there and takes a couple sacks of feathers, takes them home and feathers his own nest with it. Enough mixed metaphors here, Jose. Yeah. On the other hand, you don't want people who don't know anything at all about the tourist industry, because it's like any other multi-million-dollar industry. It's complicated, and there's a lot to learn. And if you don't know what you're doing, you could really screw things up. So the idea was to have some appointed members appointed and confirmed, and to have some industry members sit on that board and fashion good policy to attract tourists to the island. The whole lash-up is funded by the Tourist Attraction Fund, which is an 11% tax that everyone who stays in a hotel on Guam pays. That's where the money comes from. So Carl and Shinohara got in a skirt-tearing contest way back as to what markets the GVB should pursue. And, you know, if you just stood back and looked at it, what connection does United have? Honolulu. Do they fly to Taiwan? Do they fly to Korea? No. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not. There's an awful lot here that we can only speculate about, because so much of this is what happens inside people's heads. Carl has accused board members of open government law violations. It would have been nice had he sent some chapter and verse on that to the legislature, because, Jose, you know how we like open government law here on Tall Tales.
Very much so.
Yeah. Now, Carl goes on to say, the board has undertaken corrective action planning to address the risks and control issues arising from deficiencies in the bylaws. And there have been stories in the paper about the bylaws for the GVB not being in conformance with the statutory authority that created the GVB. So a committee was appointed that was supposed to come to grips with this. This is what Carl's talking about here. To address the risk and control issues arising from the deficiencies in the bylaws, I created the Business Risk and Control Committee to oversee corrective action planning and implementation of the appropriate controls, processes, and procedures. The BRCC is composed of Director Jeff Jones, myself, Deputy GM Jerry Paris, who is a very courteous fellow, Professor Ron Uggan, and legal counsel. We announced this to be to the other directors and have kept them updated on our progress. Given the issues within the bylaws, it's unclear, and we can only begin to surmise why Director Shinohara would purport to act as treasurer, which is, of course, not a legal corporate officer under the Enabling Act, to upset our efforts to institute appropriate controls. On the other hand, the language in the 23 budget bill ensures that the GM is the chief administrative officer with primary responsibility for the Bureau will ensure lawful operation of the Bureau, no less to continue to improve the control environment with the input and consultations of a board member and one of our island's preeminent authorities on its administrative laws. I wonder who that would be. I'm not on that board. These important tasks must continue uninterrupted. Then he goes on to say, certain elected membership selections appear not to have been lawfully made. The board acting outside of the Enabling Act is not only an issue under review. It should also be pointed out that 2 most recent vacant director seats were selected without a nomination process as described in the bylaws. More importantly, as a lack of transparency in the nomination process, the board failed to put the director selections on an agenda as required in the open government law. Well, my recollection is that the statute says that vacancies amongst the elected members are filled in that same way for the balance of the vacant term. So that part's okay. However, if you're going to do it at a meeting, you got to put it on the agenda. All right, let's take a short break here. Let's sell some T-shirts during that break, Jose.
Are you looking for a new place to hang out with your friends? Let's go along the sidelines at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Located at 154 Iriarty Road, Unit 4 and 5 in Tamuning behind Royal Bigs. Sidelines, a hidden gem with nothing but great things to offer. Great atmosphere, great food, top shelf drinks, and a great team. What are we waiting for? Let the fun begin at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. See you there.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
So if that meeting was held, if that election or that function took place at a meeting where that item was not included in the agenda, then those guys are not directors. Because every action taken in a void meeting is void. So Colonel's got a good point here. As a result, 2 individuals were selected unlawfully, and the board action to take and to install them is void. He's right about that. And he goes on at the end, inclusion of the membership and corporate governance. The Enabling Act gives authority to enact and amend bylaws primarily to the membership, who may vote to authorize the board to do so. Given the utmost importance of correcting the bylaws as well as the board's self-imposed suspension, it is clear that the membership should be involved in the promulgation of amended bylaws going forward. It's not advisable, therefore, to allow any usurpation by an unauthorized director of the membership's paramount role. I agree 100%. In closing, I trust that you recognize the fiscal year budget bill as presented is integral to a robust control environment. A member of the board acting without authority but with questionable motives should be not allowed to upset our efforts to protect the directors and members who wish to operate within the bounds of the law. Most of all, the fiscal limits imposed on and responsibilities of the board correct deficiencies and recover unlawful expenditures must be ensured. Please, therefore, consider what is in the best interest of the Bureau and the people and enact Fiscal 23's budget bill as presented. Please do not change the language in the bill despite Director Shinohara's comments outside of the lawful governance of the board. So, let's see here. I had a couple of other interesting items on this part. Now, I have a report of that BRCC dated July 27, just a month and a half ago. And it looks like a pretty workmanlike job. Which I would like to take this time to study and give you chapter and verse on. However, since the governor is probably going to sign the budget bill right now, it's moot because the new regime will be Carl Gutierrez running the Visitors Bureau. So trying to step back from this and look at it, you know, from every standpoint, from a board member standpoint, from Carl's standpoint, and from Chris's standpoint. The place where we do the heavy-duty tinkering, thinking, lawmaking, etc., is on the floor of the legislature, not in the administrative provisions of the budget law. That's just isn't the way to do it. It's a shortcut, and it's traditional. It's been around for a long, long time. It's probably going to be around for a long, long time. But something as complicated as this, as it appears to be from everything I've read about it, from the documents I've had in front of me, which I've had a chance to study, suggests that this is exactly the kind of work that the legislature ought to be doing. And it may very well be that if the legislature got its hands on it, they might want to abolish the Visitors Bureau as we know it and start over with a clean slate and do something different. Possible. They may want to go in and do a repair job on what we have right now. They perhaps, having studied the whole thing, would just say, it isn't that bad, we'll let it go. But that's the way we make laws. Democrats love the word democracy. That's the way we make laws in our representative democracy. We try to involve the public at the public hearing phase of the lawmaking process. And of course, given our 3-reading process, which ordinarily means getting a bill through the legislature in a month is moving it pretty fast, it gives interested people time to contact senators, write letters, etc., try to influence the path of that particular bill. That's all gone when you operate in the budget matter like this. Now, if I were on the board at GVB, I don't know exactly how that would sort out. Because the GVB board, I thought, did some kind of silly things way back when this thing first started. First of all, they wanted to know who council represented. Yeah, let's take a T-shirt break here, Jose, and we'll come back and talk about this right after the break.
Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
2 more days. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Of the massive heat wave in most of California and parts of Nevada and Arizona, California's Governor Gavin Newsom claims the temperatures are unprecedented.
This heat wave is on track to be both the hottest and the longest on record for the state and many parts of the West for the month of September.
The excessive heat warning continues until Thursday evening. California set a record for power consumption yesterday, but managed to end the day without the power companies having to trigger rolling blackouts. Political advisor Steve Bannon, who served briefly in the Trump White House, is preparing to surrender himself to prosecutors in New York State tomorrow, expecting an indictment. The Washington Post reports sources believe it will claim fraud in fundraising for the group raising funds to build a border wall. Bannon calls the charges phony. A Trump-backed candidate has won the Republican primary for governor in Massachusetts. Former state lawmaker Jeff Deal telling his supporters,
We are going to be redefining politics as usual here in Massachusetts. For the first time in our state's history, we're going to run a campaign that is focused specifically on we, the people, our freedoms, our rights, and our prosperity.
Nominated by the Democrats, the state's Attorney General Maura Healey.
I don't know about you, but I am tired of the anger, the vitriol, the division. That's not who we are. That's not what Massachusetts is all about.
The first day of school in Seattle today, postponed. Teachers there voting to go on strike. The man accused of abducting Memphis school teacher Eliza Fletcher will be back in court today, this time to be arraigned on new charges, including first-degree murder, after police confirmed the body found Monday afternoon was Fletcher's. Wall Street down yesterday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 173 points. NASDAQ down 86 points. The S&P 500 closing 16 points lower. America is listening to Fox News.
Joyce Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning show.
Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning Mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all three.
671-888-7346. That's 888-RGIO.
Are you looking for a new place to hang out with your friends? Let's go along the sidelines at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Located at 154 Iriarty Road, Unit 4 and 5 in Tamuning behind Royal Bigs. Sidelines, a hidden gem with nothing but great things to offer. Great atmosphere, great food, top shelf drinks, and a great team. What are we waiting for? Let the fun begin at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. See you there.
The governor of Florida highlighting the restoration work on some of the state's waterways.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis stood in front of the Loxahatchee River to highlight emerald waters, saying in 4 years he raised the state's spending on environmental restorations from $1 billion.
Not only did we do 2.5, we did 3.3 billion, so we more than doubled.
That included infrastructure improvements and policy changes, including changing how the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers would discharge water from Lake Okeechobee.
So you now have water going through the Everglades in record amounts like we've never seen before. It's going into Florida Bay. Florida Bay is nicer. You look at what's happened on our coast. They've gotten better.
In Jupiter, Florida, Evan Brown, Fox News.
The number of people killed in the earthquake in western China has jumped to 74. 26 people still reported as missing. Frustration is rising with uncompromising COVID-19 lockdown measures that prevented residents from leaving their buildings following Monday's 6.8 magnitude quake in the Sichuan province. In the capital of Chengdu, 21 million citizens are under strict COVID-19 lockdown. Former Theranos CEO Elizabeth Holmes, appealing her fraud conviction, claims a key prosecution witness now has regrets.
When Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes was convicted of investor fraud and conspiracy earlier this year, Adam Rosendorf was one of the key witnesses. The former lab director for the blood testing company testifying he had raised concerns about the accuracy of tests. But a court filing says Rosendorf now feels he's done something wrong long and has been trying to meet with Holmes, suggesting it could be healing for both of them. In a 17-page request for a new trial, her lawyers also say Rosendorf showed up at Holmes's residence in August, claiming prosecutors had tried to make everyone look bad. Tuesday's filing coming on the same day a federal judge denied a request to set aside the verdicts, citing Rosendorf's testimony. Lisa Brady, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglona from Security Title. A power of attorney can be a useful tool in a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate a secure closing. We are here to help.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Okay, so here we are, another wonderful job of putting on that halftime show by our producer Jose. You're not pitching both halves of the doubleheader anymore, right, Jose?
No, no longer.
Okay. So I left off talking about Carl versus as you were Chris Duenas versus the Carl. Chris Duenas explained why he voted against the budget bill, and one of the reasons was because of the floor amendments slipped into the administrative provisions of the bill that changed the governance of the Guam Visitors Bureau. And I've kind of given you some background on that, trying to examine it from different viewpoints. As Senator Duenas, as a senator, yeah, I think, you got to start out with the proposition that when major changes are made to government agencies, they should be made by law. Laws are made at the legislature through a rather deliberative process, not a slide it into the administrative provisions and let it go. Now, for the folks who are with me so far, the reason that these things exist is because we don't have a constitution. We could have a section in our constitution that would tell you what the legislature must do if it is to make a law. As an example, the state of New Mexico has, and other states do too, has a single title provision, which says that every bill must have a title, a single title, and the content of the bill must conform to that title. So you can't put two subjects in one bill. So if you want to change the governance of GVB, it would have to be in a standalone bill. New Mexico also has something called an anti-donative provision, which says that you can't give anything to somebody, to another person, a company, a corporation, whatever, except for the kind of consideration that would support a contract between two private parties. And there's a list of exceptions to that. But we need that. If I were writing a constitution, I'd put the date, the holidays in it, and say the governor cannot give people an extra holiday just to pander to the people before elections.
No more Black Friday.
Yeah, exactly. So I can understand why Chris Duenas would veto that budget, just based on what happened here. This is a major decision. I can understand, having read Carl Gutierrez's letter and made myself somewhat familiar, given that the board is on strike, I could see where, he perhaps is operating on the proposition that somebody's got to do something. We can't just keep stumbling ahead with nobody in charge.
The buddy system.
Yeah, right. Then I look at the board, and the board did some things I thought were really awkward, if even worse, if not worse. Because when this question came up about governance, conflicts of interest, open government law, etc., and the general manager was critical of the board and some of the things that they had done, then the board said, well, ask counsel, who do you represent? Do you represent us or him? And counsel said, I represent the Guam Visitors Bureau, which is the right answer. And then the board decided, well, if counsel's going to represent Gutierrez, we need to have our own counsel. Dumb. Stupid. And then when things didn't come out the way they should have, even though the Carl did set up this committee to conform the bylaws to statute, which is the right thing to do, then the board went on strike. So they kind of said, we're not going to do it. And then later on said, but we don't want anybody else to do it either. So I can see that I can see two clear points of view. For the board, not so much. I suspect I'll be talking about this again. I'd certainly like to hear from the folks out there in the peanut gallery as to how you guys feel. Okay, next item on the card. This is without precedent as far as I'm concerned. I have never seen anything like this before in my life. And that's a long time. This I have in front of me in order over the signature of Francis Didenko Gatewood, the Chief Judge of the District Court of Guam. And it arises in a case called DM versus Holy See, State of the Vatican City, its instrumentalities and agents, those 1 through 10 and others. Now, you probably wonder why you see this in captions of court cases from time. Let's turn on the Law and Order notebook here, Jose. Why do you see cases like Jones versus Smuckahukowitz and Doe's 1 through 25? And I'll tell you why. In California pleading law, which is where Doe pleading comes from, if you think that someone else, if you're talking about a tort case, and you think that in addition to the named defendants, others were guilty of tortious conduct, but you don't know their names. You've got an idea who they are, but you don't know what their names are. But you feel confident that in a discovery process, you'll be able to find out the names of those people. Then you join them as Does. And when you find the names, then you make a motion to amend, and you substitute John Smith for Doe, or Jeff Johnson for Doe, or Bob Bullock for Doe, or something like that. Now, that's California pleading. and it's not part of federal pleading. However, federal pleading uses something called notice pleading. And the idea is that the plaintiff files a short and plain statement, letting the other side know what it is that they did wrong, how they violated the law or whatever, and how much the plaintiff thinks that's worth. It's pretty loose. So this whole dole pleading thing has snuck into federal pleading here on the island, even though it's not part of federal pleading. So when DM says he's suing the Holy See, instrumentalities and agents, does 1 through 10 and others, that's what he's talking about. Now, when he says instrumentalities and agents, there's a concept of liability called respondeat superior, which means that if the agent commits a tort, the master must respond. If I'm driving a truck for Martinez Trucking Company and I get into an accident with that truck and I hurt somebody and somebody sues, they can not only sue me as a driver, but they can sue Martinez Trucking and probably other folks on the theory of respondeat superior. So not having read the complaint, when DM talks in terms of instrumentalities and agents, I suspect that's what he's talking about. Probably trying to make the argument that the Archdiocese of Agana is an instrumentality of the Holy See. The plaintiff here is listed as DM. Courts will allow a person to file a suit without putting his real name on the complaint. Counsel has to file a motion, has to say, I represent so-and-so, whose name is, etc. He's born on such and such a date. His social security number is whatever. His shoe size is 9D, whatever, right? All that stuff. But because of the inflammatory nature of the litigation and the potential for embarrassment, DM would like to proceed anonymously until such time as it becomes necessary for his identification to be made. Courts will grant those motions, and then you'll see DM versus the Vatican City. So that's what we've got here. So here's what the judge issued an order on September 6th. At the hearing held on August 26th on the Holy See's motion to dismiss for lack of subject matter jurisdiction, lack of personal jurisdiction, insufficient service of process, and failure to state a claim upon which relief can be granted. Now let me explain that. Failure to state a claim upon which relief can be granted. That's the old common law demurrer. And I'll give you an example of how it works. Let's say that Jose and I get in a little skirt tearing contest, and I figure I'm going to sue Jose. So I say, yesterday at noon, in the middle of Agana, Jose Martinez proceeded on the sidewalk along Marine Corps Drive in my general direction, and as he approached me, exposed his bare face.
You almost went there.
Yeah.
So did I.
So I could probably prove that up. You know, I got my cell phone out there. I'm taking pictures, etc. I could prove it up. What I say is true, but I have not stated a claim upon which relief can be granted. There's no legal theory that would allow me to recover from Jose because I saw his face.
It happens.
It's a lucky day, Jose. Yeah. So that when you see this in articles about legal cases, failure to state a claim upon which relief can be granted. Even if everything you say is true, the law is not going to allow you to make any money. That's what it means. let's see, at the hearing, etc., the court asked counsel for the Holy See 2 questions. 1, in light of the plaintiff's earnest attempts to serve the Holy See, if the court finds improper service but permits the plaintiff to attempt service once more, is the Holy See amenable to accepting service of process through any of its attorneys? Now, what this means is this. The way you start the average lawsuit here on the island is you got a summons and a complaint. A summons has a seal of the court on it, and it's an official legal document. In order to start that lawsuit, the plaintiff has to cause service of that summons and complaint on the defendant. Service means you find him somewhere and you give it to him. Here, you've been served. An alternative way to do it is to knock on his door. And if a person of apparently suitable age and responsibility answers the door, the process server says, "This is a summons and complaint for Jack McClukenbosch. Please make sure he gets it. He's got 20 days to answer." The plaintiff then files what's called a return of service at the court. He signs a declaration under penalty of perjury relating the facts that I just stated. And the time clock starts to run. The defendant's got 20 days to file an answer or a motion or do something. That's what we mean when we say service of process. Now, it can get extremely complicated when you're serving process outside your own jurisdiction. There are long-arm jurisdiction, all different kinds of different ways to go about it. But we know from another article in the paper that there's an international convention on serving foreign countries, which must be complied with. And if you're going to serve the Vatican City, you've got to comply with those rules. Plus, your summons, complaint, and any other documents have to be set forth in Latin and Italian, which means I suppose that the process server has to hold a summons and complaint like this when he goes to the front door of the Vatican. "I forgot the summons and the complaint for you." So the judge says, ask counsel if the Holy See would be amenable to accepting service of process through any of its attorneys. In other words, the judge is saying, can't we just streamline this process? Can't you say, I have authority to accept service on behalf of the Holy See? He gives you the summons and complaint. It's a matter of record. Time starts to run. Can't we do that, counsel? And then the second thing the judge asked was whether Pope Francis is inclined to meet with all Guam plaintiffs who alleged abuse at the hands of church clergy or laypersons to discuss a global settlement. Global settlement means you don't settle them one at a time. You take the whole kit and caboodle and you work out a settlement for the whole thing. Counsel for the Holy See stated he could not respond to the inquiries without consulting with the Vatican first. Of course not. Vatican's his client. Judge Gatewood goes on and says, before the court issues its decision on the motion, the court would like to know the Holy See's responses to the questions. And then the heavy-duty part of it. The court orders counsel for the Holy See to file a post-hearing response indicating whether counsel has conferred with the Holy See about the 2 questions, and if so, what is the Holy See's response to the court's questions. Counsel's response shall be filed no later than September 13. So, in a sense, the judge is saying, ask your client if he wants to settle. That's what she's really saying. Because the Holy See has been through this an awful lot. And the Holy See, as far as I know, always contests liability. They always come back and say, even if what you say is true about the misconduct of priests and bishops and cardinals, the Holy See is not liable for the following reasons. And my understanding is that they've always prevailed on that. For a couple of reasons, I guess, I suppose. So what the judge is doing is saying, do you want to settle this case, Vatican? Even though you have an absolute right to contest liability here? And, of course, a judge wouldn't get into this, and you may very well be right. That's why I say I've never seen anything like this before. As far as the service of process, I suspect that's kind of routine. Examining it from the standpoint of counsel, dealing with the judge, being in court is a matter. It's not politics, but obviously counsel wants to make a favorable impression on the judge, wants to appear to be reasonable, etc., on target, and so on. And there's an old saying around the bar that goes like this: a good lawyer knows the law. A great lawyer knows the judge. So you wouldn't want to present yourself in a way that the judge says to herself, this guy is just playing hardball just to make it as difficult as possible on the plaintiff, even though the plaintiff is bound to get it right sooner or later. Cases are supposed to be decided on the merits, not on these little fringe battles that just tend to run up fees and make it much harder.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
It's just another delay.
Yeah, and make it much harder on a plaintiff to get to the merits. Chances are you don't want the judge to think that. Judges decide cases on the law and on the facts. But like everybody else, human nature has a lot to do with how a judge goes about things. Now, there's a theory called legal realism or judicial realism. I don't subscribe to this, but I don't exactly shrug it off either. It said that the way judges decide cases all too often is they look at the facts, they get some idea what the case is about, and they decide how it should come out. And the way they decide on how it should come out is dependent on a lot of factors that are not in the papers before them. Where they grew up, how they grew up, how they were raised, where they went to school, who their friends are, what they had for dinner last night, what they plan on doing after the court recesses, etc. Judges perhaps aren't even completely aware of this, but human nature is human nature. So that theory of judicial realism holds then that once a judge kind of zeroes in on how he wants to decide the case, he goes to the books to find not language in the books that helps him decide the case, but language in the books that helps him describe the result that he wants to reach. That's pretty cynical. But it's the thing that people talk about. So certainly Judge Gatewood doesn't want, certainly Jeffrey Lena, counsel for the Vatican, doesn't want to get off on the wrong foot with a judge. So he might very well reach out to the Vatican. He couldn't just call him on the phone and say, she wants me to consent to service and jurisdiction. Consent to service, not jurisdiction. My sense is it's probably something we ought to consider very thoroughly. I don't want to get on the wrong side of this judge from the get-go. After all, I'm an out-of-town Jasper in a pinchback suit, and she's kind of tipping her hand here as to how she thinks the thing should come out. So I think we ought to seriously consider that verbum sapiente. Gotta speak.
Verbum sapienti.
Sapiente. Yeah. You got to do it in Latin, right?
Sounds like sparkling wine.
Verbum sapiente, abbreviated verb sap, means loosely a word to the wise is sufficient. One word should be enough, right? Verbum.
Sap.
Yeah. So this is really interesting. I'd be really interested to see what happens on the 13th.
Now, these aren't the cases of versus Apron, are they?
Apron is a defendant in some of these cases.
Some of them, with the Vatican still attached to it.
Well, the Vatican is not attached to it.
Oh, okay.
And their theory is this. Apron was the Archbishop of Agagna. The Archbishop of Agagna works for the Pope. Respondeat superior. The torts attributable to Archbishop Apron, going a step even farther than that, the torts attributed to the priests are attributed to Apron as the superior, and that's why we have that judgment against the archdiocese, and then the torts of the archdiocese are attributable to the Pope, to the Vatican. So that's the theory. Right now, the Vatican is not a defendant in this case, but that's exactly what DM wants to do. He's filed a motion to join. Let's see, what was the caption again? The Holy See, State of Vatican City, its instrumentalities and or agents, those 1 through 10, and others. So he wants the Holy See. Well, the Holy See is a party in this case, but it's not our case. It's not the big case, not the case that Francis is sitting on, and that's why she's saying a global settlement. Global settlement means that the Pope would settle not only with DM, but he'd bring in all of the plaintiffs from the other case and settle them also. Now, if that could be done, I can understand why she'd want to do it, to get that whole mess out of her court. And it would probably be a pretty good deal for the 300 defendants. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the Vatican sees it as something it wants to pursue. If counsel for the Vatican is going to say there's a slippery slope here, if we start paying these guys, what about all the rest of these folks all over the rest of the world? So as I say, I haven't seen anything like this before. Certainly going to watch it like a hawk. Let's head for Wrigley Field in the 7th inning stretch.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
Does your physical workplace have an impact on the mental outlook of workers, their overall job satisfaction, and their productivity? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll talk about that and what you might want to do about it. It's The Extra Point here on 93.3.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point by Jerry Roberts at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts on The Ray Gibson Show on 93.3 The Point.
Get ready to save up and chow down with Pacific Points. Now you can redeem Pacific Points for UnoGo wallet credits and enjoy huge savings on food delivery. Order from over 80 restaurants and have it delivered straight to your door. Continue earning points when you fuel up at Shell, shop at Foodies, purchase ITNE prepaid load, and pay your monthly ITNE bill. Then get ready to claim your rewards. Learn more at PacificPoints.com. Pacific Points. Do more, get more.
Seventh inning stretch here at Tall Tales, Wrigley Field, world's most beautiful ballpark. If you're watching your screen right now, you think that most of the people in Wrigley Field are wearing tailgater shirts. A worthy ambition for sure.
Almost.
Yeah. Okay, so we come back to the show here, and next item on the card is the Civil Service Commission versus whitewash. And I've talked about this before. The Civil Service Commission, when it examines these political violations, improper political activity on part of government employees, is not an adversary system that we're familiar with, like our court system, like the Civil Service Commission, adverse action appeals, etc. It's an inquisitorial tribunal, where the tribunal goes out and rounds up the facts, decides what the law is, and then makes a decision. It doesn't work as well as our adversarial system. Now, Europe uses the civil law system, which is an inquisitorial system. There's a magistrate. The magistrate and his investigators go out and do the investigation, come back with a report, tell you what the law is, and then kind of make the case. Not a good system. First of all, we don't even know who the inquisitors are at the Civil Service Commission. Well, we know the name of one of those people. It's kind of a strange name. I don't think it's a Chamorro name. It's Staff. We have the report from Staff. And I don't know if that's his, her, they, their first name or last name. But Staff does a report. We don't know who Staff is. We don't know what governs them. We don't know how far the whole idea of judicial realism takes them, because so often the commission adopts Staff's recommendation. So, for instance, in Klitzkie versus Stephanie Flores, I don't get to go before the Civil Service Commission, make my opening statement, say that the evidence will show that Stephanie Flores, et cetera, introduce my documentary evidence, put Stephanie on the stand. I don't get to do any of that stuff. I can watch, but all of the heavy lifting is done by Staff. And you saw how that worked as far as mental health is concerned. Staff couldn't find anything wrong. And I suspect that Staff decided that on a basis other than one that would have been arrived at had there been an adversarial proceeding. Yeah, my sense is that Staff's constructional preference is, let's not enforce these things too vigorously. So here we have Civil Service Commission won't act on campaign ads mailed to school. Says it doesn't violate Mini Hatch Act. The Civil Service Commission won't take action on allegations political advertising material was delivered to Agatha Johnston Middle School last month. Teacher Gina Call. Now you know where my bias is right now, Jose. Gina Call's a tailgater.
Indeed.
Teacher Gina Call filed a complaint with the commission August 12 after she said she found campaign literature outside the office of an administrator at the school, according to a staff assessment read during Tuesday commission hearing. Call told commissioners she had walked into the office at the school one day and found the advertisement for a campaign sitting in a stack of mail. I asked the office lady and she said, "Oh, it was just delivered by the mailman." Mailman? You can't call somebody a mailman, can you?
No, not anymore.
The postman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Person.
The person man.
Post person.
Yeah. And she was unaware of what to do with it, so she left it there. The teacher took photos of the campaign materials and filed a complaint because she believed the material was a violation of the Mini Hatch Act, a law that restricts political activity by government employees. Call said she wanted the commission to investigate whether the ad was intra-agency mail sent through the post up through the Department of Education. She said she didn't believe her school administration was aware of the political advertising that was delivered. But the assessment done by, here he is, CSC staff found the advertisement wasn't in violation of the Mini-Hatch Act because it was distributed by a paid ad agency to postal customers across the island. The CSC doesn't have the authority to investigate the U.S. Postal Service, which falls outside its jurisdiction. Sounds like we got some amateur lawyers up there. Commission Chair Juan Calvo motioned to adopt the staff recommendation that no investigation take place. Commissioners voted in favor of the motion, with Commissioner Priscilla Tuncap recusing herself because she said the candidate on the ad was related to her. Like, Priscilla Tuncap's got a big family. Everybody that comes before the commission is related to her.
So now we know the ad.
Huh?
Okay. I think we might know who the ad is for.
Yeah. Calvo said the matter was outside the authority of the CSC. The PDN was awaiting a response from the Department of Ed as of 5 p.m. Well, okay, so this is what we know. Teacher walks into an office and sees a political flyer laying on a desk. Civil Service Commission somehow figured that this was an ad that was, what did they say? It was distributed by a paid ad agency to postal customers across the island. So if you want to distribute political advertising in a school, Jose, what you do is have it mailed to the school. And then when you get to the school, pick up the mail and leave it laying around. Because apparently once it hits the mail, you know, the Civil Service Commission it's like fruit of the poisonous tree. Civil Service can't touch it. That was in the mail once.
They get stiff like a staff.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that would be a good way to get around the Hatch Act. And then, of course, rather than hand it to somebody, just leave it on your desk so that if anybody wanted to pick it up, you're not looking or anything like that. See what I mean by this no adversary? If I were trying this case, I could have won it.
So that just means that, like, Gina can only bring the complaint, and then that's it.
Uh-huh.
Everything else is...
She can't go. She
can't
can't
say anything.
Nothing.
No question and answer.
Nothing. No cross-examination. Wow. Nothing.
Wow.
It's all in the hands of CSC staff. It's not a good system.
How are the commissioners chosen?
They're appointed by the governor, confirmed by the legislature.
Makes sense now.
Uh-huh. It does, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, and of course it's a 7-member commission, one commissioner, one vacancy. The fewer commissioners on board, the better for the governor, because it takes 4, an affirmative vote of 4 to take action. Now, when the nominal defendant in the case is Stephanie Flores, who works in the governor's lash-up down there for the lieutenant governor, what do you think the chances of finding of staff determining that she violated the law, which, you know, the reports make it clear. You know, Gamboa said, I filed my candidacy, I got to resign. Stephanie says, oh, no, please stay. That's a violation of the Hatch Act on her part and on his part, but maybe more serious on hers than his.
Very interesting. It takes 4 for a quorum. One's covering their eyes, one's covering their ears, one's covering their mouth.
And
What's the 4th one doing?
Related to one of the parties.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, symmetry is the real key here, Jose. Yeah, so I don't hold out much hope that justice will be served in Robert Klitzkie versus Stephanie Flores. I think that's coming up tomorrow.
And that person would most likely be going back to his position.
Yeah, Gamboa. Yeah, so let's say that Gamboa is reinstated, and then no action from the commission. It wouldn't occur to them. So I write a letter and say, hey, you remember that guy Gamboa? He's back on the payroll now. They would come up with some hokey ruling like, well, yeah, but there was a break in service between the time he committed the violation and his current employment, so we can't go back to that.
And he's not running anymore.
Say again?
And he's not running anymore.
And he's not running anymore, and he probably never run again because he didn't make it through the primary. No harm, no foul. They're going to have that translated into Latin. No harm, no foul. That'll be the motto of the Civil Service Commission. Okay, next item on the card is not no harm, no foul. It's marijuana versus the people. And all of you guys out there who, the champions of marijuana, are not going to like this very much, but I think it's really important that I get this into the record. We're going to go to Churchill Downs, and then I'll read this into the record, and we're not going to be able to say goodbye to our president today.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglona from Security Title. A power of attorney can be a useful tool in a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate a secure closing. We are here to help.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Okay, so here we are, Churchill Downs, and this is an article I gleaned from Table Mag, and the title is How Weed Became the New OxyContin. Big Pharma and Big Tobacco are helping market high-potency, psychosis-inducing THC products as your mother's medical marijuana. For 30 years, Dr. Libby Stoit, a recently retired addiction psychiatrist in Pueblo, Colorado, treated patients with severe drug dependency. Typically, that meant alcohol, heroin, and methamphetamines. But about 5 years ago, she began to see something new. I started seeing people with worse psychosis symptoms that I have ever seen, and the worst delusions I have ever seen. These cases were even more acute than what she'd seen from psychotic patients on meth. Some of the delusions were accompanied by severe violence, but these patients were coming up positive only for cannabis. Stoit wasn't alone. Healthcare professionals throughout Colorado and all over the country were seeing similar episodes. Ben Court, who runs an addiction recovery center in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, watched a young man jump up on the table in the emergency department, stripped naked, claiming he was the god of thunder and threatening to kill everyone in the room, including 2 police officers. A collegiate athlete Court worked with also had a psychotic episode and was shot 5 times by the police with a beanbag gun before he was subdued. In Los Angeles County, Blue Store, that's somebody's name, Blue Store, S-T-O-H-R. Blue Store, a psychiatric social worker, had a patient who climbed a 700-foot crane and considered jumping off it, not because he was suicidal, but because he thought he was in a computer simulation like the Matrix. Those patients, too, were high only on cannabis. In 2012, Colorado legalized marijuana. In the decades since, 18 other states have followed suit. As billions of dollars have flowed into the new above-ground industry of smokable, edible, and drinkable cannabis-based products, the drug has been transformed into something unrecognizable to anyone who grew up on marijuana pre-legalization. Addiction medicine doctors and relatives of addicts say it has become a hardcore drug like cocaine or methamphetamines. Chronic use leads to the same outcomes commonly associated with harder substances: overdose, psychosis, suicidality, and yet it's been marketed as a kind of elixir and sold like candy for grown-ups. I got into addiction medicine because of the opioid crisis, said Dr. Ronit Lev, an addiction medicine doctor in San Diego who hosts a podcast about drug abuse. Years ago, she advocated against the overprescription of opioid painkillers like OxyContin. Now she believes she's saying the same thing all over again. The specious claims of medical benefits, the denial of adverse effects, from big tobacco to big pharma to big marijuana. It's the same people and the same pattern. So what they're saying here is who's getting into marijuana now? Is it your friendly neighbor who wants to start up a little lemonade-like stand out in his front yard? Or is it big pharma, the big drug companies? Or is it big tobacco? You smoke already anyhow, right? Big marijuana. Prior to legalization, marijuana plants were bred to produce higher and higher concentrations of THC, a naturally occurring chemical compound in the plant that induces euphoria and alters users' perceptions of reality. In the 60s, the stuff hippies were smoking was less than 2% THC. By the 90s, it was closer to 5%. By 2015, it was over 20%. It's a freak plant that resembles nothing of what has existed in nature, said Laura Stack, a public speaker who has advocated against the industry since her son Johnny killed himself 3 years ago at 19 years old after years of cannabis abuse drove him into psychosis. And I haven't seen the Facebooks pop up yet, but it's no worse than alcohol. I've been using pot since I was 17. Yeah. In the era of legalized weed, the drug you think of as cannabis can hardly be called marijuana at all. The kinds of cannabis products that are sold online and at dispensaries contain no actual plant matter. They're made by putting pulverized marijuana into a tube and running butane, propane, ethanol, or carbon dioxide through the tube which separates the THC from the rest of the plant. The end product is a wax that can be 70 to 80% THC. That wax can then be put in a vacuum oven and further concentrated into oils that are as much as 95% or 99% THC. Known as dabs, this is what people put in their vape pens. And in states like California and Colorado, it's totally legal and easily available to children. There are no caps on potency, said Stack. If you're over 30 and you used to smoke weed when you were a teenager, the strongest you were smoking was probably 20% THC. Today, teenagers are dabbing a product that's 3, 4, or 5 times stronger and are often doing so multiple times a day. Why can't they just go back to something like sniffing glue or something?
Mustard.
At the level of that level of potency, the impact of the drug on a user's brain belongs to an entirely different category of risk than smoking a joint or taking a bong rip of even an intensely bred marijuana flower. It's highly addictive, and over time there's a significant chance it can drive you insane. If you've ever smoked a bowl and become irrationally anxious that everyone is staring at you and knows you're high, what you experienced was a mild symptom of cannabis-induced psychosis. According to one study, about 40% of people react this way. If you experience that paranoia and keep smoking on a regular basis nonetheless, especially with today's high-potency THC products, and especially if you're young, there's a good chance you'll eventually suffer a full psychotic break. 35% of young people who experience psychotic symptoms, according to another study, eventually have such an episode. If you keep using after that, you can run a decent risk of winding up permanently schizophrenic or bipolar. Cannabis has by far the highest conversion rate to schizophrenia of any substance, higher than meth, higher than opioids, higher than LSD. 2 Danish studies, as well as a massive study from Finland, put your chances at close to 50%. 1 out of every daily users can expect to develop schizophrenia if they don't quit, Christine Miller told me. But quitting THC products of that potency is almost impossible, Stite said, comparing its addictive power to tobacco. The days of marijuana addiction being merely psychological are over. There's a definite withdrawal syndrome that includes irritability, anger, anxiety, massive cravings, can't sleep, can't eat. So I'm not going to finish this article, but I think you get the point. And here we are, we've got a cannabis control board, and we're driving full speed ahead into this, right? Well, you know, because marijuana is no worse than alcohol and tax revenue. Okay, I got to take a moment here to, we're not going to say goodbye to our president today. I'm going to read a news release that came from the Archdiocese of Acadiana. Archdiocese extends prayers of healing for Governor Leon Guerrero. On behalf of Archbishop Michael Burns and the Archdiocese of Acadiana, Vicar General Father Romeo Convocar extends prayers for the healing of Governor Leon Guerrero. We pray for the protection and recovery of Governor Leon Guerrero, who was taken to Guam Memorial Hospital today, according to several news agencies. May our loving Father also guide the physicians and medical professionals who tend to our island leader and all people of Guam. We share continued prayers for all who are sick, elderly, or bedridden, etc. That came from the Archdiocese. I've turned off the sarcasm channel here at Tall Tales. Let's take this all very seriously, and let's wish our governor well. Prayers would certainly be appropriate. Okay, hope there's some good news on that one tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
California sets power consumption record. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Demand for electricity hitting a record high yesterday as the heat wave continues to bake the state. The agency that watches over the power grid warned there'd be rolling blackouts unless the demand eased. Tuesday ended without the power companies having to force outages. Governor Gavin Newsom says it's not over yet.
Everyone has to do their part to help step up for just a few more days. Individuals, the state, industries, business, all doing their part to help reduce strain on the grid.
The excessive heat is forecast to continue for another 2 days. Former Trump political advisor Steve Bannon is facing potential new legal troubles.
Bannon is expected to turn himself in on Thursday for state charges in New York related to his fundraising effort to build a wall along the southern border. Federal prosecutors charged Bannon with diverting more than $1 million to pay an alleged co-conspirator and cover personal expenses, but former President Trump pardoned him on the federal charges. In a statement, Bannon says they're coming after all of us, not only President Trump. In fact, I have not yet begun to fight.
Fox's Chris DeMaio. In Tuesday's primary election in Massachusetts, Republicans nominating Trump-endorsed candidate Jeff Deal to run for governor.
You know, this campaign has always been about you, the people of Massachusetts. I am tremendously humbled and honored to have received your support at the polls today.
In November, he'll face the Democrats' nominee, Attorney General Maura Healey.
As I'm traveling around the state, I see too many people are hurting. And these are the people who drive me and drive this campaign.
Massachusetts incumbent Governor Charlie Baker chose not to seek re-election. In Memphis, prosecutors have filed first-degree murder charges against the man who'd been arrested for Friday's abduction of a school teacher. Police confirming Tuesday a body found Monday evening near the abduction scene is Eliza Fletcher's. America is listening to Fox News.